Delaware. It is Thursday, May 1st. I'm Peter MacArthur. Glad you could be with us today. We like to check in every now and again. Chris Burkhard, Placer Staffing in Newark, to keep you up to speed on what is happening in the economy, more specifically in the jobs marketplace. And this is one of those days. Chris, hi, how are you?
Pete, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, love to have you on. Thanks for coming on. Listen, there's a lot that's happened since we talked last when it comes to things like the economy and the job market, consumer confidence, CEO sentiments, the stock market, all declining recently. So I have kind of a three-parter you can meld into one answer. Job numbers, where do they sit? What about Delaware's job market? And where are the jobs right now?
Great three-part question. One interesting thing is that certainly sentiment, whether you're a consumer or a business leader, been trending down. But one common thing until right now is there's been no real noticeable judgment in the data around jobs. So there's an ADP report came out yesterday, private payroll report. Now, it is volatile. It's just one report, 1 month, but it was significantly off of its forecast. It came in at 62,000 when it was expecting 147. The government survey is tomorrow, and the expectation is that there'll be 133,000 jobs, and that's kind of the one to watch, I'd say. But really, there's been very little change until right now. Now, we've talked unemployment for 5 years when I've been on your show, and we're in a very narrow range of new unemployment. It's right in that 20 range. That's not up. That's not down. It's pretty regular. In fact, that's the folks that go get unemployment each week that reflecting that there's a change. There's this thought of continuing unemployment and folks that have been on in a while, and that's really going down. And overall, in the nation, unemployment's gone up a bit, 4.2 from 4.1. But the real biggie that I see is the real what's going to happen tomorrow and the next month and the next quarter. How many jobs are advertised? And that is down about 1 million jobs from, this month over last year. So, a big part of it, probably won't surprise you, Pete, is that there aren't as many federal jobs being advertised. And a lot of talk about those that might have their job impacted. But folks who want to work in government right now are certainly looking to state or local or private for work. Now, as far as Delaware, we got a pretty good thing going. We're at 3.7% unemployment. We're pretty constant with about 19,000 people on unemployment. What I have noticed is that there's a lot of new entries into the workforce. So far, Delaware's been able to keep up with the demand, create jobs that are equal to those that are interested. Now, what I do see is healthcare, education, and government are driving the job, and I would like to see more in the private sector. We have been hard in professional services and tech jobs. I'd like to see that change.
We flip the calendar to May, Chris, and all over this great country of ours and this great state of ours, kids in college are packing up and getting ready to come home, some of them for the last time. I'm talking about the graduates here. What does the job market look like for them right now?
I think this is for all the parents and families, right? This is what they want to know about, right? It is a huge investment. And students and families want to see, their degree create opportunities and a good career and a return. Congrats to all these newly minted grads in the area. But what I see is recently, this is interesting, unemployment for new grads is up to 5.8 from 4.8. That's just this quarter. So it's something to pay attention to. However, college grads are getting jobs faster than the rest of us. Most are getting jobs in 90 days. I do have a bit of a thought, though, and it's that, your first job, it's just not your life sentence. It's not your purpose in life. Most first jobs help us figure out what we really need and want in a job, what we like in work, whether our degree is a real calling. So I'd like to kind of take a little pressure off that, if we all reflect and think about our first job, it may have just been a great foundational step to where we are today. It's so hard on a graduate to really get out there and make sure they're living their dream.
Sure thing. You think about the kids coming out of college, I shouldn't call them kids, but, and they go to their interviews, and in some cases, it's their first experience with a formal interview process. And they're prepared, I think, for the most part, to answer questions, but it's undersold the importance, I think, Chris, of them being able to ask questions to interviewers. Why is that so important?
Well, I think we'd all agree that interviewing is one of those life skills we just don't do enough to master. It seems like we're preparing and then we don't do it again for a few years if we're blessed and lucky, right? So most interviewees really prep to answer questions of the interview. They rehearse them. They get their answers down. Yet when they are asked, do you have any questions? Most sit there. And if you don't believe me, about 50% of people that don't ask questions or don't engage are rejected and don't move on to the next step. And it's just so common for an interview to ask, hey, Pete, what do you know about our company?
Right.
Why are you interested in our company? It's just so standard. And it's a chance to learn more and stand out. So my advice is simple. I encourage people to prepare 5 to 10 questions, even write them down. Gosh, if you have a notepad, it's okay to have the notepad out. But you can ask about the interviewer's journey at the company culture. One of the things I advise is don't make your questions about your salary or PTO or benefits. That can come across as self-serving. There are times in an interview where that's an appropriate topic. But if that's your only question, just kind of makes you look like all you're interested in when it probably is not the case. It's just how it looks.
Right. And it's an opportunity to show some insight. And that's huge, certainly. This is a big question, Chris, and I don't know how prepped you are to give us your insight here. Very uncertain time for business leaders right now. What advice would you give to leaders and to decision makers regarding things like workforce planning right now?
Well, obviously I have to share that this is my whole world with placers, so I might have a bias and I might have an interest in this answer. Doesn't mean I don't believe with conviction what I'm going to say. I think we're finally back. 2019, one important factor. Uncertainty requires flexibility. And we've just come through these years of the pandemic where businesses reacted to what was labor scarcity by hiring a lot, even overpaying. And now business conditions, change from that roaring pandemic. And a lot of business leaders kind of lost that advantage to be able to flex and lower labor costs. So what's happening is the last couple of years, businesses have been unwinding from this. And I hear it from the workforce. Why are there less jobs posted? Why is it a slower hiring process? You're not seeing layoffs, but companies are not replacing people. And I think what it is organizations are trying to get back to this baseline with workforce planning. And my suggestion is that this is the moment. There are always going to be phones to answer, product to ship, product to make. Organizations need to tune back in and pivot and get back to outsourcing, contingent labor, get back to using flexible resources. And I think it'll be more in balance to what really was 2019. Now, the flip side, Pete, if I might, get a lot of comments from this about workers. I always say to you, we always need an agent, like somebody needs to represent us, not just rock stars and actors. But the last few years have been easier. Jobs were easy to find. You could get a raise. Or we're back to that reality where we all got to manage our own careers. And in reality, the jobs are going to be more on the contingent side. I still believe that 50% of us are going to be contingent, outsourced, temp, Uberized. And the world's going to shift back to that. It has to.
Okay. If you want to find out more about Chris and his team, do what I'm doing right now. MyPlacers.com is the spot to find out everything that they have to offer. Chris, always a pleasure. I appreciate the information. I appreciate the insight today.
Thank you, Pete. Have a great Thursday.
You as well. Chris Burkhard, Placer Staffing in Newark.